Hey, how you doing? Welcome to the first installment in building the HM293 Flying Flea. Even though this is a simple little airplane, the whole thing is still kind of a daunting task. And where do you start with something that big? And there's a lot of schools of thought on that. Some people like to start with the fuselage. That makes sense. Everything attaches to the fuselage, and plus when you get the fuselage built, you get something to sit in and make airplane noises. Works out okay, but then the fuselage is kind of in the way while you're building everything else. A lot of people like to start with the rudder. That makes sense. You get to try out your building skills on a smaller piece, and when you're done, you can hang it up on the wall. It's not in the way. For me, I like to start with the wing ribs, and there's a couple reasons. One, building the wing ribs is the most repetitive task in the whole construction process. And so if you build them and get them out of the way first while you're still fresh with enthusiasm for the project, it's great. It can get a little repetitive, and so doing that early is kind of a good idea. The other thing I like about doing the wing ribs is you get into your building rhythm. So to build a rib like this one takes about an hour and a half. So if you can spare an hour and a half a day, in the evening, in the morning, whenever you get time to do it, you can build a rib and get them out of the way. You're going to have to build, I don't know the number, 45, 50 ribs, something like that total. So you're looking at maybe 2 months worth of evenings. But by doing them a little bit at a time, hour and a half a day, you're making progress, and while everything is still fresh in your mind and you're excited about the build, you get the ribs done and out of the way. Then, just like the tail parts, you can put this up on the wall and until you need them for the final assembly. The wing rib style that I've chosen is this truss design. Another way to build them is to put them in a jig and just do the top and bottom cap strips with a couple risers and sheet the whole thing with plywood. It's a little bit quicker doing it that way, but there's a lot more material and it's being heavier. And I don't know, I just like the looks of the truss style. So let's go build some wing ribs. So this is what we're going to build. This is just a standard wing rib, mostly 1/4 inch material and some 1/16 inch gussets that we'll be putting on it. And this particular one is one of the main rib sections for the center section of each wing and a little bit of the outboard. You're going to have to build a bunch of them, I think around 30, 35 of that particular type. In order to build it, the first thing you need to do is build a jig. This jig, you can see here, holds the rib in place, holds all the pieces together while you set it up and glue it and let the glue dry. Once it's glue is dried, you take that off, and then you can put the gussets and stuff on the other side. This is a pretty simple wing rib jig. All I did was transfer the drawings from the plans onto a piece of plywood and glue on a bunch of little blocks that will hold all the wood pieces in place. This one's pretty simple. Here's the one rib I've been working on, making a bunch of these. I have a smaller rib out here for the tip. And flip it over, and I've got the two other pieces that are used as the tip rounds over and gets narrower. You need to make smaller ribs. They're all laid out on this. Very simple jig, didn't take a lot of time to put together. I've seen some jigs that are really nice. They have cam locks and all sorts of neat things. They're a piece of art in their own way. But for me, a simple jig like this seems to work just fine. I didn't spend a lot of time and effort putting it together, and I'll be able to make all the ribs I need just off of this. Now we're ready to start making a rib, and we're going to be putting all the pieces in the rib jig over here. But before we do, we need to prep one of these pieces. And if you look right here, you'll notice on this top cap strip this pretty sharp curve. Well, at least sharp enough that if you didn't do something, the wood might split if you tried to bend it around there. So what we've done is we've soaked the wood in a little bottle over here. We'll take that wood out. The end of it's nice and wet. It becomes a little more pliable. If you steamed it, that would even be better. I don't happen to have material here to do my steaming. I made this little jig here. All it is just a little notch, and we'll stick the wood into there, and then slowly, carefully, and just keep pushing down on that and listening for it If it starts to crack, then you know that we got to start over. We're just trying to put a little bit of a pre-bend in this piece. Hopefully this is showing up okay. We'll go slowly around there, let the wood take the curve. And if you're just a little slow and patient, you can pull this off and get away without having to steam it. I'm just going to come down here, and it's got a nice curve to it. And again, this nothing fancy, just a little piece of rope. Wrap around here a couple times, just to kind of hold it in place. Made that look a lot harder than it should be. And there. So that's it. We're going to set that aside to dry. And here's one that I took out of the jig a little while ago. So you can see it starts out with a nice little bend on it. That'll go very nicely into the jig without giving us any problems. So I start out up here at the nose block, and this is just a piece of 1/4 inch plywood, and that's the pattern. Sits in here like this. In goes the bottom stringer, and oftentimes I find that I need to trim this a little bit, and that looks like the case here. I'm just going to get that in place as best I can. Trim that a little. Trim the top just a little. Actually, no, that's going to fit okay. Okay, so that's in place. This is in place. Continue to set that into the jig. Until we get around here to the tail. Now these pieces come together, we've got to trim one of them. So put this in place here and just we're going to cut that right there. So you see we put a little angle on that. Okay, so that's in place. So the top and the bottom stringers are in place. Now we need to fit in all the little pieces and diagonals. And we'll give that a start. I'm just going to take and mark that with pencil. Okay, so that's a little tight right there. I'll just take and trim that. And it goes. So we're going to do that whole process all the way down until we get all the pieces in.
And this is what it looks like with all the pieces in place. Forgive the shadow there. I didn't make you wait for me to do all these, I just got them in place. Now I want to show you, like right here, look at that joint. Well, it's not the best joint in the world, is it? All those. None of that matters a whole lot. Because what holds this together are these little plywood gussets. They go on over top like so, which we're going to be putting on next. And that's what provides all the strength that holds all these pieces together. So if it's not an exact fit, don't worry about it. Try to get it as close as you can, but it does not have to be an airtight, precise fit. Let's talk about the gussets for just a second. I've seen all different types. Typically, you either do them in a circle, so they're either places like this would be a half circle, and over here would be a quarter circle, and that's one way to do it. It's kind of neat because they're all the same, and you can just have a circle cutting jig and cut out a whole bunch. I prefer to make mine rectangular. It doesn't waste as much wood, and it's lighter. I mean, you're talking about grams here, but it is lighter and stronger because all the wood that is here is serving a purpose, where the curved pieces, you end up with wood out here that's really not doing much for you. So I already started with a big piece, 4x8, 1/16 inch plywood. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it's strong enough. And I've taken and cut these strips. They're 1/8 inch, and we're going to cut all our gussets out of those strips. And again, I could choose to make all my gussets the same size. Maybe I don't know, they ended up being something like 1.25 inches. They would do all the pieces, but I'm going to lay mine out individually, so that the gussets are just the right size for each individual joint. And that's easy. I'll show you how to do it here. We're going to use our pattern rib as an example. So I'm going to go in order. I'm going to start up here at the front and just mark how big that one was. Then we'll go to the next one and do all the rectangular ones first. The next one. Okay, so they're all marked out. Now we're going to go cut them. Now, cutting these out is really easy. You just need a utility knife and a square. And as you can see, I've laid out two of these pieces. We're going to cut them two at a time. One set of gussets will go on the rib that we're putting in the jig, and the other goes on the rib that we just took out of the jig. A little tip on this, the end gets pretty dull. It doesn't take too long, but this part right over here stays really sharp. And so when you're cutting on a place like this, when the tip is dull, you have to push hard, and that tends to then jump up over this, and that sharp part will do a number on your thumb. So these blades are really cheap. That one's already been used. I'm going to take a new blade. Okay, so now we got a nice new blade. So I've got these two pieces lined up together. The ends are lined up. This is tight against the square, so I've got a nice square cut. Push down on this. Oops. 2 or 3 strokes, that's all it takes. I'm running out of room here a little bit, so I'm going to pause my cutting and take and stack each of these in order. And keep them in order like this. I don't need to number them. I know that this goes on the front of the rib, and as we work our way back, we keep coming down the pile. Okay, we need to cut some triangular pieces also for some of these gussets. And I just kind of eyeball it. I leave a little bit of space right there. Stick those each on 3, so I know I got 45 degrees. Ah! And push down hard enough. Push down hard. Carefully cut. And this one, line it up here. Leave a little bit of wood right there. Pull tight. You can see those are the type of pieces that we're getting. Now keep doing that. We need 3 for each side of the rib. It's a total of 12. And we'll finish cutting those out. Okay, the gussets have all been cut out. Everything is in place. We're ready to glue them up. And need something to mix the glue in. I use these little yogurt containers. I eat a lot of yogurt. They work well. You can also use the bottom of a soda can. A lot of people like to use that. I like the yogurt one. I can mix a little bit more in that. So that's what I use. And we're going to be mixing up T88 epoxy. Let me start putting some of that in there. And I know I'll get some grief on this one. Some people really like to, and it's a good idea to really precisely measure the amount of epoxy that you're putting in. It's supposed to be 50-50 by volume, it's like 0.8 or something like that to 1 by weight. I've always eyeballed it, and you can get pretty close. And I've never had any issues with the strength of joints. I've done this on several projects, several airplanes. And there you go. You also get an idea as you're doing this how much to mix up for a given batch. And through trial and error you'll figure it out how much you need. I try to get pretty close. I also try to err on the side of not quite enough. And you'll see when we're putting this together that we're going to do 2 ribs, right? We're going to do the one that we took out of the rib jig. That needs its gussets glued on the back side. And we're going to do the one that's new and fresh in the rib jig. So those gussets will go on the front side. So that's why we cut out the 2 sets of ribs, or 2 sets of gussets. And why we're mixing up enough glue to do both. If you don't have quite enough to do both, that's not too bad. That's okay. Do the one that's in the rib jig first. That one needs to get done. The one that's already out of the rib jig, if you don't have quite enough glue to get all the gussets on right now, no biggie. You can, if you end up with a couple gussets short, you'll just glue those on in the next application. If you have too much glue, well, you've just wasted it. And I'm kind of frugal, fiscally conservative, cheap. So I try to mix up no more than what I need. Looking at this batch right here, I'm fairly confident it's more than what I need. So, but it's pretty close. So anyways, I do it by sight. I mix it. I spend some time here mixing it really well. To me, that's certainly as important as getting the 50-50 mix right. I want to make sure all those little A parts and B parts get mixed together so they can do their chemical reaction and get the epoxy hardening. So there it is, that epoxy is ready to go. We're going to put it on with one of these little brushes. I buy them in a pack from Harbor Freight, but they're a little too soft for my liking for this application anyways. So I'm going to trim just a bit off the end, give it a little haircut. There we go. That's made a stiffer brush now, which I like that stiffer one a little better for getting the glue on. So that's what we're going to use. Okay, we're over here at the rib jig, ready to go. We got our glue mixed up, our brush is ready. Stapler has staples in it. These are the staples that we use. I use a 1/4 inch. They're JT21s. You get a staple gun that'll shoot those, and you can get these staples anywhere. I got these at Walmart. And this is the end of my batch here. Before I start, I always try to lay out 2 extra staples to make sure I've got them even before I mix the glue up. You want to make sure you've got those ready just in case you run out, and you'll go through one of those at about 1 1/2. So if this was almost empty, you might need both of those, and I don't know how many's in here right now. So I'll start out with getting the glue on everywhere first. I'll clean off my little mix stick. Set that aside. And then on it goes. Make sure we get it on the stringers, those top and bottom stringers, and trying not to get it on the parts of my rib jig. So I want to make sure I get the glue on the parts I'm gluing and only the parts I'm gluing. If you do get a little on the rib jig, it's no big deal. Just make it a little harder to pop the rib out when you're all done. And you get some of these little fuzzies that come off, no big deal. So I've got marked the triangular one there and rectangular one here. Those are marked on the jig itself, so it gives me an idea where to put the glue. And just get that glue on there a little bit. You don't want to be stingy with the glue, obviously. You need to get enough on there to get a good joint, but don't get carried away with it either, because the excess then will run down the sides right down into here and glue your rib onto the jig. So what I'll do normally is I'll go down and put down the glue for everything, and then I'll come back and put the gussets in place. Since I'm just showing how this is done, we'll change this up a little bit. So there's that front piece, and it goes on there. The triangular pieces, and like so, and like so. And again, these don't have to be in the exact, right down to a little teeny tiny fraction of an inch right location, as long as I get them in close and they look nice. So we're overhanging here just a little bit, trying to keep it square. Same thing, we kept this square here, it overhangs here. So the only place you really want to be a little careful is this is where the spar is going to go. So when I put these on, I try to make sure that they don't overlap, into the spar area, because then I'd have to trim them. Go down like so, getting them all close, and then we take the stapler and one in this piece, one in that piece. One in all 3 pieces. You will notice as you put a little pressure on the stapler, the piece wants to move around on you a little bit. Just take your time, be patient. And that's it. We're going to continue that on down the rest of the rib till we finish it up. Okay, we've got all the staples in. This piece is all done. It's set up overnight and the glue is all dried. So now we need to pull the staples out, and we're going to use this little tool here. It's called a heavy duty staple remover. You can get them at the hardware store or on Amazon, and just got a little shoe on here you stick under the staple and pry it up. Wiggle it a little bit, rock it back, out comes the staple. So I'm going to spend a few minutes here getting all the staples out. Little safety tip: when you're doing this, don't do it like this, because this will come and stick into your hand. It's not that sharp, but it's sharp enough you won't like it, I'll put it that way. So we're just going to continue on down, remove all the staples out of this piece, and then we're going to take it out of the jig. Okay, we've got a handful of staples that we removed. Now this is ready to come out of the jig. Just going to use a little screwdriver to help pry it up. So it usually pops out pretty easy unless we have too much glue on in some area. There we go. Now we need to trim it. So we're going to trim all these extra pieces that are hanging out here. We're just going to cut them off with a knife. There it is. That side's all done. We'll flip it over and glue all the gussets on the other side, and the rib will be done. So the rib that's in the jig is all glued up and stapled. Now we're going to do the rib that we took out of the jig. I wanted to show you this because here we can be a little bit sloppier with the glue. If we get any extra, it's not going to end up gluing the rib down to the table. So we're just going to continue on down the length of the rib, putting on the glue. And that's it. Nothing too complicated here. We'll go on down and get them all. So there you go. That's how you build a wing rib. Not that hard. Doesn't take all that much time, maybe an hour and a half to get one built. And it also doesn't cost that much money. There's not a lot of material involved. So with all those things considered, it's a pretty good way to start your building process. And that's one of the reasons I like to start there. Good luck with your wing ribs, and hope they go smoothly. Get them built. But right now, I've got a tea time. So next time we'll build some other part. Till then, take care.